Can you guys hear me? Pretty good? Yeah? Okay. Sorry, we're a little behind schedule. Had some technical difficulties and wanted to make sure that everything was here. Oh, did I do that? No? Oh. I'll be careful next time. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Mary Miro. I'm the Executive Director of Reform for Illinois. Welcome to our forum, Can Changing the Way We Vote Boost Voter Turnout in Illinois? So first, thank you to Jim Allen and the Chicago Board of Elections for hosting our event today. I want to acknowledge, as of last week, Illinois Campaign for Political Reform officially changed our name to Reform for Illinois. So thank you to everybody who made it out to our relaunch party. We're really excited to continue our work to build accountability and transparency in Illinois government. This is a new chapter with a new name, but we have the same mission. Reform for Illinois recognizes that improving voter access is an equity issue, and it's essential to creating a strong democracy. So I want to thank you guys all again for being here today, participating in this conversation. Thank you to our panelists who are going to be here today. It's a really important discussion. Illinois ranks 23 nationwide for voter turnout. And with the election only 1 month away, Reform for Illinois is taking a closer look at voter turnout in Chicago and the rest of the state. From our conversations with election administrators and community advocates, we understand that there are a number of unique challenges in Illinois affecting not only voter turnout, but voter access in our state. So the objective of today's panel is to explore these challenges and the proposed reforms to improve voter turnout. There are a number of election reforms taking place around the country, including vote by mail and vote center models. So today we're going to learn specifically about some of the reforms that have been implemented in Colorado. For the first part of today's forum, we welcome Amber McReynolds, the Executive Director of the National Voted Home Coalition. Amber formerly was the Denver Director of Elections, and she's going to share with our group today about some of the election reforms that she helped usher in Colorado. Then the panel will begin after Amber concludes. So stick around. We've got a lot of really great perspectives to share with you today. Okay, thank you, Amber.
Well, it's great to be here. I'm actually originally from Illinois, so grew up a little bit west of Chicago, a couple hours in a small town. Went to University of Illinois and moved out west about a little over 13 years ago. So it's really nice to be back here. I have a ton of family here. Very much love the city of Chicago and being back in Illinois. I have, up until August 15th of this year, I was the Director of Elections in Denver. Was the Director for 7 years and was in the office 6 years prior to that. So actually was in the Denver Elections Office administering elections for the past 13 years. When I started in Denver, we were primarily a polling place, precinct-based model with early voting and with absentee voting as an option. We sort of saw various policy changes over the time that I was there. And then in 2013, it sort of made sense for us to move in a different direction for a variety of reasons, including the fact that most voters were choosing to get their ballot in a different way than what we were delivering to them in terms of services. So I actually helped write a lot of the laws that we now have in Colorado about 5 years ago, and I guess architected them in many ways. And I primarily did that because of my experience running the different types of elections that we had had. I was acutely aware of what voters' experiences were because we clearly wanted to deliberately look at what voter challenges look like and what voters were having issues with when they were voting in their process. So we were very deliberate about reviewing this data, asking voters for their perspectives, and paying very close attention to what voters wanted. Another one of our objectives as we looked at this model was to add transparency to the process, add security to the process, make our voter registration lists more effective and cleaner. And we really wanted to achieve kind of all of these objectives, including adding efficiencies to the process, and then figure out a better way to allocate resources for the election itself, and figure out better ways to purchase equipment that wasn't as expensive as what we were doing sort of back in the day. So we'll go to the first slide here. So I put up this slide because generally the election process in the United States was never ever designed for the voters first and foremost and the voters at the front and center of the process. It essentially has been designed to accommodate candidates, campaigns, political parties, and basically outsiders. It has never been a process that was designed to put the voter first and deliver the best customer experience possible for the voters. There's a variety of examples of that up here, including gerrymandered boardwalk. That sort of indicates some of the redistricting things that have been problematic over time. The community chest indicates some of the campaign finance issues that we now face as a nation because, again, voters were never the first and the foremost. It's always been about somebody else in the process. And then just generally the barriers that exist across the country in terms of the voting process. So in our efforts in Colorado, we did not choose to be Oregon or Washington, which is primarily vote-by-mail states, traditional vote-by-mail states. We chose a different path, and we wanted to include voter registration reforms, same-day registration, automatic registration, proactive list maintenance through the post office, using the national change of address data. We wanted to preserve in-person voting options at vote centers. So if you did not want to use that ballot that was mailed to you, you had the option to go in person. And then those vote centers can also accommodate anyone who registers to vote after perhaps the deadline that you would need to mail a person a ballot. So our model very much is about convenience and providing all options that we can to voters to make that experience better. And Illinois, being the 23rd state in turnout, Colorado is actually the 4th highest state in the nation for turnout, and we have the highest voter registration rate, and we were recently rated as the most secure place to vote and cast a ballot. So we've basically tried to change the rules of engagement in terms of the election process and try to put the voter first, and a lot of those reforms came about from that perspective. Next slide. And to go to the rules of engagement, this just illustrates sort of why our country was never put the voters first. But this says women ballots. So back before women got actually the full right to vote, it was sort of an incremental process where women could vote on certain issues, including maybe educational type questions that had to do with their kids at school or things like that. So women's ballots often were put in certain boxes, and then they would go through different types of fraud detection and different types of methods to determine if those ballots should be counted or not. But I just wanted to put it up there because it again kind of illustrates where we've come as a country, that this was not always something that everyone had an ability to participate in, but there's always been a lot of barriers, and a lot of the rules of engagement were decided by very few, and there's a lot of that still going on today. So next slide. So we can and must do better. So here's what we try to do in Colorado, and this is what I would encourage today as we talk about potential reforms. Try to reimagine this in a different way. Just because we've done it a certain way for 20 years or 30 years or 50 years or what have you, doesn't mean that we need to keep doing it the same way. When I started in Denver, I was asking why. Why are we doing this? Why are all these voters calling? Why are we making this so inefficient for voters? And the answer to that always from so many people was, we've always done it that way. We can't change it. We've always done it that way. We're never going to be able to move it. So I would encourage us to think about this differently. We didn't think about it differently after the 2000 election when there was a rush in Congress to allocate funds to fund a lot of equipment that is now either has been shredded or is in scrap metal facilities. And now, kind of 18 years later after that 2000 election, now there's a rush back the opposite direction, meaning that we need to have a paper ballot associated with every vote cast, and we need to have better audits and all of that. But part of the reason that we made a big strategic mistake, from my perspective, back in 2002, is there was this huge rush right after an election to basically develop and pay for a lot of technology to support a bad process. So provisional ballots came into being, which is a good thing and a good safeguard, but most of our voters should not be voting on a provisional ballot, and many of them are today. So we need to think about this differently. We need to put the voter first and build back from there. 2018, we're about to do this again. And you hear about this. Congress just allocated actually the rest of the HAVA funds that they had not allocated 18 years ago, or 16 years ago. And states are about ready to buy all new systems because we have
of cybersecurity, and that's kind of the issue of the day. And my perspective on that is we really need to think about the process differently before we throw technology at basically a bad system and a bad process. So what if we can do all these things? What if we can enhance the customer experience, proactively communicate to voters in a better way, create operational efficiencies and reduce costs, increase transparency and accountability, and increase engagement and turnout? What if we can do all those things? So I want to put up now a slide from the 2018 primary. It's hard to see up here, but this is available on the website. This shows all the states and then a variety of states and the type of method that they just voted in the primary election. The green bars are all primarily vote at home, meaning they either voters have the ability to opt in and get that, or they're automatically mailed a ballot, just like they are in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. The blue states are all polling place states. And New York actually is a bit overrepresented here, but as per the population in New York State in their recent primary election, anyone want to take a guess at what it was? 3%. 97% of New Yorkers did not participate in their recent primary election. And New York actually ranks at the bottom usually in terms of turnout and election performance generally. So the blue states are all primarily polling place, very little ballot delivery or vote at home. The green states are all that method. The only two blue states are over here. They have an anomaly. So Washington had a very competitive Republican primary for governor. So there were 3 candidates actually in that race, a lot of money spent. They were a polling place state, but they also have a citizen-driven ballot initiative right now in Wyoming to go to the Colorado model of ballot delivery. So they also have a high absentee amount as well. And then Oklahoma is another interesting one. They have medical marijuana on the ballot. They have a marijuana issue. So any marijuana issues drive turnout, and I know that for a fact because I'm from Denver and I'm from Colorado. And we've seen that over time. So those 2 blue bars, I kind of caveat that because they sort of had some special circumstances. But you can see that generally this method of voting gives people more options in their voting process. We'll go to the next one. The other thing I want to put up, this is a survey that was recently done by The Atlantic, and it asked different communities of voters what challenges they had in the voting process. These were the top 6 reasons that were indicated by voters in minority communities on why they had challenges. And the different colors, so all Americans are the sort of black dot, white Americans are the blue, black, yellow, Hispanic, orange. And so it just sort of gives you where everyone falls. But the reasons that people found challenges were couldn't get off work to vote when the polls were open because they were restricted to that period of time. They were unable to find the correct polling place because it changed or they moved and they didn't know where to go. Was told their name was not on the list even though they are registered. Missed the registration deadline. Were told that they did not have the correct identification or were harassed or bothered while trying to vote. So those were the top 6 reasons that people said they had challenges. So the method that we have in Colorado solves all but one of them, or makes it better. Maybe not solves, but makes it better, improves it. So we'll go to the next slide. This just shows the same thing, but broken down on a bar chart and kind of based on percentages, and then also adds in age. So age down here, you can see blue is age 18 to 29, so those are young voters that already have a low turnout. They marked all of these, couldn't get off work when the polls were open, thought they weren't on there, all of that. And again, the model in Colorado has effectively solved many of these sorts of issues. Go to the next slide. Okay, so that's it. I just wanted to share that data. A lot of that data is available on our website, so voteathome.org. That's the new organization that I'm now at. I've basically been hired to try to share some of the things that we've done in Colorado and help states not only consider implementing these sorts of things, but actually make their vote-by-mail processes better, because we also know that a lot of states are not doing this that well. There are states that require you to do notary on your mail ballot, which is silly. There's states that don't have good signature verification, in place, and that's really a requirement we need to have to do it effectively. So we also want to help states and jurisdictions get better at handling vote at home and vote by mail type of processes as well. So yeah, let me show this video. A lot of people ask me about how we communicated to voters about this model and how voters find out about it. This is our marketing video. Hopefully,
Vote at home, whenever you like, before Election Day. Standardized ballot trace allows you to track your ballot from the moment it's printed to the moment it's received for counting. Be sure your address is up to date and sign up for ballot trace to ensure you vote in comfort this election season. Fulfill your patriotic duty and vote in the convenience of your own home.
so that was sort of we tried to make a catchy video that was on digital and kind of on all the social media things to just make people pay attention to it and understand the options they had. But a lot of people always ask me about marketing, and it's sort of funny, right? Because if we're mailing you the ballot and you get the thing in the mail and it says, here's your official ballot, you don't have to do a whole lot to say, here's what your options are, right? But we did do a lot of digital ads to just communicate to people and let them know what their options are. Okay, I think we're going to the panel now, right? Thank you so much, Amber. Yesterday we actually had a community discussion. So Amber met with a number of community organizations, sort of more of an in-depth discussion about some of the work that she's done in Colorado. So we want to thank you for being here both days. Really appreciate it. Okay, now it's time for our panel. As I say your name, please come up to the stage and then we'll get going. So Jim Allen, you do have to wear the sunglasses. No, please don't. Jim Allen is the Communication Director for the Chicago Board of Elections. Next we have Kalmetta Coleman, who is the Vice President of External Affairs for the Chicago Urban League. Ami Gandhi is the Director of Voting Rights and Civic Empowerment at the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And Cheryl, okay. Amber McReynolds, Executive Director of the National Vote at Home Institute and Coalition. And Noah Prates is the Director of Elections in Cook County, Illinois. And Representative LaShawn Ford. Thank you guys so much. And now I'd like to introduce our new Policy Director, Elisa Kaplan. Elisa will be moderating today's panel, so give everyone a warm welcome. Does that work? Hello? Does that work? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our extremely distinguished panel for taking time out of their busy schedules today. Mary talked a little bit about the reasons that we are all here. I'd like to start out this panel discussion by asking the panel, why are you all here? What would you like to see broadly and more specifically for the communities that you represent from an election reform plan? And we can just start down the line with Noah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having us. You know, after the last election, we laid out an agenda sort of increasing access to the ballot, and that being understood as a primary driver of interest and turnout. One of the things that we laid out, and we stole it from Denver and Amber, was the idea of increasing efficiency in the petition passing process by shifting from handwritten signature gathering to a tablet-based signature gathering. What that does is it drives up the good counts of signatures from the 40 to 50% that we have to north of 90%. So basically campaigns are getting high levels of efficiency, administrators are getting high levels of efficiency, and signers who aren't registered the address they put down. Instead of having their signature disqualified, they're re-registered through that process. It's just a modern way to do politics. And when you got competition, that drives turnout. We also put out a suggestion that we lower the burden on candidates. You know, in suburban Cook County, you needed nearly 9,000 signatures to get on the ballot as a Democratic candidate, and to run for governor, you needed 5,000. But if you look across all the races, despite many candidates filing, there was one competitive countywide race. And voters understand when there's nothing on the ballot. You know, it's pretty important to drive competition. That drives ideas. So our focus has been primarily in that realm, coming out of the last election.
Thank you.
Well, in addition to the comments that I made earlier about how we've achieved some reforms across Colorado, it's primarily the focus has been putting the voter first, and that was something that when I came into the Denver office, I had come from a nonpartisan civic engagement group that had focused on increasing civic engagement amongst young voters on college campuses and making the voter registration process easier for them. And when I came into the election world, none of the processes seemed easy or accessible to voters. And so our focus in Denver has very much been about changing and updating processes to make it easier for voters, and then, if appropriate, building technology that supports voters in the process. So I think that just that approach and sort of how we think about election processes, whether it be the petition process, through the campaign finance process, or any of the things that touch the process, we really need to think about ways to put the voter first and sort of leave the partisan politics at the door when it comes to the election process. And I think that's vitally important to building a better election system, and one that voters can be proud of, and one that doesn't choose outcomes, but one that provides an equal opportunity to everybody to participate in a meaningful way, in an accessible way, and respects people's time and how they interact and what have you. We also know that voters think about the election about 4 minutes once every 2 years. So given that, and given that it's one of the big challenges that people had is finding a polling place or figuring out where to go or figuring out the deadlines, we need to think about it in a different way if we want to make things better. And I think when we do put the voter first and think about what's best for them and use the data and all of the metrics associated with the election process, and then build a process that supports them and serves them as customers, we actually then also, and we've seen this in Denver, create operational efficiencies, and we've driven down our costs in the election process as well, and that is very meaningful to jurisdictions that need to conserve resources, don't have access to as much resources as they had perhaps before. And so we have to think about how do we serve more people more effectively and make it evenly accessible, so that there aren't winners or losers, but there's equal opportunity for everybody. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm Ami Gandhi with Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. We run the Election Protection Hotline 866 Our Vote in Illinois and across the country with other partners. One item that's very critical to our work and our civil rights agenda is for there to be racial equity analysis involved when there's any proposed change to our voting system. I would be the first to say, and my organization would be the first to say, that our voting system is not perfect right now, and improvements and efficiencies are surely needed. And in the process of talking about those and instituting those, it's extremely important to consider what might be the effects, even if it's unintentional effects, on different voters, including voters of color, low-income communities, voters with disabilities, and so on. It's important in that process to get input from community members most directly affected. So if we're talking about improving some polling places, if there is also, as part of that decision, the idea to remove or overhaul other polling places, to hear from people in different neighborhoods, in different regions about what the effect would be on their day-to-day life is very important as part of this process. We have I think everyone here probably knows this, but we have a track record in Illinois, especially in recent years, of community organizations and voters and election authorities having really positive collaborations to make our election system better. So we have a lot of potential here that if there are reforms in place, it can really succeed for a lot of different types of communities if we have good communication and opportunities for direct community input.
Thank you.
So I should ask you the question again. I didn't write it down.
Why are you here, and what would you like to see from an election reform plan?
Okay, so I'm here. Good afternoon. I'm here because I was invited, and I'm very happy to be a part of a conversation about voter turnout and boosting the numbers. You know, as an African American, as didn't know, I'm African American. I know why people need to vote more and to make sure that it's easier and fair. So I definitely want to be around people that's talking about it, so I'm very happy to be here. And I concur with everything that the previous speakers said, and I really like the way Amber, I'll just take your model, and I think it's great, but the most progressive change that I would like to see, I would like to see people in prison vote.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? So my name is Calmetta Coleman. I'm Senior Vice President of External Affairs for the Chicago Urban League. The Chicago Urban League works to strengthen African American communities, particularly in Chicago, through both direct service and advocacy. So we've been actually registering voters since 1975. So we know that lots of African Americans actually are registered to vote. In Chicago, African Americans actually make up about a third of registered voters, but we also know that quite often they are not voting. So that is really why we're here, because we really want to understand, we've been working to understand why they're not voting. As we're understanding some of those reasons, we know that actually everything that you put up on your slide, we've heard. We've heard that everything from they actually don't know how, they don't know where to register, they didn't have time, they were too busy, and perhaps worse is that they don't think it matters, right? And we know in this city that many of our African American, predominantly African American, and also I would say Latino communities, are the communities that actually need to be voting most, because we tend to be the most disenfranchised. And so we really want to find new ways to really encourage people to get out. We think probably the single most important thing that we can do is to better educate voters about their rights to vote. You mentioned voters in prison and in jail. And so we know that actually if you are in jail, here, you actually do have the right to vote. But then in some cases, it doesn't matter if there's actually no process for you to do that. So we really want to work to educate people, because there are a lot of people also sitting at home who just aren't voting for various reasons. So that's primarily why we're here today and why we're looking for reform.
Thank you, coming up. My name is Jim Allen. I'm with the Chicago Election Board, and I used to think I knew elections when I was a reporter, and I was covering them, and then I thought I knew elections better when I actually worked in the campaign and when I moved to a different part of my life. And then I grew my knowledge and thought I knew elections pretty well after 12 years here, and then I went to Denver for a conference. And suffice it to say, there's a lot more details and a lot more moving parts to what we just received. Amber McReynolds is one of the most respected and highly regarded election executives in the entire United States, and there's a reason for that. The model that they built there was not one that came easily, and as she referenced, there were a lot of political forces aligned to protecting their own interests and protecting it. And right now, there are systems in which the remapping is designed to pick the voters, and then closer to election day, they want to pick the subset of the voters within that district that they want to participate. And this model, this series of models, I should say, is really aimed at much more inclusiveness. I've spoken at conferences, and I know Amber's spoken at conferences where I received the feedback after we explained what we did in terms of our voter engagement project in 2012. And I heard back from county clerks from different sized jurisdictions. Turnout is not our job. and I respectfully disagree. If we're not marketing voting in elections, who is? Because the messages and the sound bites that you hear in these 15 and 30-second commercials where they're spending millions of dollars, that's not engaging voters. So we've done everything that we can with online registration, election day registration, expanding grace period registration during early voting, automatic voter registration, and so we went from there toward participation. We grew early voting. We've been a leader in the state in that for many years, and now we're in the process of growing vote by mail. But what we're seeing is just shifts in the same people using the elections. So we're not seeing increases in turnouts. So the models that are out there are proven. And I'll just close my intros with something I pointed out yesterday. Anywhere there's been election day registration put in place, from Maine to Montana and everywhere in between, red state or blue state, once they get it, the voters will not let them take it away. They've tried. They tried in Maine, it failed. They tried in Montana, and it failed. And it failed in every single county in both of those states. So, if you look at these vote-by-mail programs, and where states have gone largely or entirely vote-by-mail, and Colorado is a hybrid with election day, universal vote centers that anybody can go to, any location. So it's not this broken system that we have of precinct-based voting. All these states that have had it for a decade, 2 years, 4 years, 2 decades, what have you, none of them go back. It's similar to election day registration. No one has ever said, let's go to that more expensive, less inclusive, lower turnout, broken system of trying to get every ballot style right and count on people who only do this 2 days a year. 2 days a year. I mean, imagine opening, just think about this business model that we have. 2,069 precincts in the city of Chicago, 1,600 in suburban Cook. Let's say you did that with burger franchises or banks, and you made everybody come in and do their year's business just on 2 days. And you used part-time workers who got 3 hours training in advance. And after you did all of those transactions, the world wanted to know what the outcome was before there was an audit, less than an hour after the polls closed, and if it took longer than that to balance how many burgers and fries and shakes you sold or how many bank transactions you did, something fishy was going on. We've got a cheap system and high expectations, and I think there's a better way to do this, and that's why I'm here.
Oh, we have a...
I'd like to.
Hi everyone, we have one more panelist today. This is Cheryl Jansen, who's the Director of Public Policy for Equip for Equality. So thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Cheryl. We're enjoying this.
We're glad you're here. Cheryl, would you like to answer this question?
And can you repeat the question?
Why are you here? What would you like to see from an election reform plan in Illinois?
Well, as Mary said, I'm with Equip for Equality, which is the protection and advocacy organization for people with disabilities in the state of Illinois. And we provide legal advocacy services for people with disabilities. And we also have a special role under the Help America Vote Act to ensure that people with disabilities have full and equal opportunity to vote. And we receive federal funding for that purpose. So this is really making sure that people have full and equal access is a part of our core mission and a big part of what we do. And I'll tell you that although there are federal laws and state laws that are designed to protect and make sure that people with disabilities indeed have full and equal access to the electoral process, they continue to face barriers. And there are a variety of barriers that they continue to face. One of them is physical inaccessibility of polling places. Another is discriminatory attitudes and practices of sometimes election officials, poll workers, and even the people that would help to facilitate people with disabilities going to vote, such as a guardian or a caretaker or even a service provider that an individual might rely upon in order to exercise their right to vote. Also, a lack of education about voting rights, and that's true not only of people with disabilities, but again, about election authorities, poll workers, caretakers, and service providers. And a constant issue for people with disabilities in terms of being able to go out to exercise their right to vote is the lack of affordable and accessible transportation, particularly for those who are seeking to vote at their polling place on election day. So there is work that remains to be done, and we are committed to that work, and I'm very glad to be invited to this forum today because I think this is an extremely critical issue, perhaps now more than ever, and I greatly appreciate the invitation, and I sincerely apologize for my being late.
Thank you so much. I want to pick up on something that a couple of you mentioned, and this question is aimed primarily at the advocates, the community advocates in the room. A few of you have mentioned reasons why people in your constituencies don't vote. Why don't more people vote? And what can we expect from instituting reforms like vote by mail or vote center? To what extent can we expect reforms like this to address those reasons that people don't vote? And to what extent might we need to pay attention to other factors? Tommy, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I'm happy to share a few thoughts on that. Some of the reasons that we hear frequently from voters who call our hotline or who we work with in person, or people who are eligible to vote but not yet involved in the system, include negative experiences with government systems, whether it's at the polling place or in the registration process, or a lack of knowledge. I think you'll hear in Illinois, when it comes to voting obstacles among eligible voters, many times the problems are solvable, and as I mentioned earlier, I think community organizations, generally speaking, have great interactions with election officials in this area and in the state, but it still is wrong if someone is prevented from voting and feeling comfortable in a voting situation if they're entitled to vote. And as far as lack of information, it's important to know that there are numerous people who are eligible to vote but not yet registered, not familiar with the process. That's one of the reasons for reforms like automatic voter registration, which has been passed in Illinois. But it's critical for voters at this juncture. If we're talking about someone from a community who's historically been not just underrepresented in voting, but actually excluded from voting, I don't know that the answer is to tell that voter or that community have less interaction with government officials, have less interaction with your neighborhood polling place, and participate by mail instead. For some people, that is the appealing option. We're really fortunate in Illinois to have mail-in voting here as a tool, but it's an option, and it should be an option. I don't know that communities who have historically been excluded from our voting system would be better served by that being the only option. Similarly, with regard to vote centers, if there were a place where universally people from all over the city could vote, or multiple such places, that could be very helpful for some community members. If it comes at the expense of a neighborhood polling place or a more close-by option, then we certainly would need to get more input from communities most directly affected before we could really assess whether these changes would be helpful or harmful or both.
Comment, go ahead.
So back in May, we did many of you are familiar with Charter Community Trust does these on the table discussions, and we did one because it was shortly after the primary election where the lowest voter turnout was among millennials at 3%. So it was, well, that's what they were saying.
Jim, please do clarify
This is a myth that happened.
Okay.
A reporter with Channel 2 ran away with a snippet of a statistic that was how many people among the people who used early voting were 18 to 34, and then drew the wrong conclusion that was what their turnout was. Their turnout was about 20%. So it's not as strong, and I'll come back to that. It's overall the city turnout was 33%, but if we can kill that myth once and for all, I think it would help us all. But it's still not good.
Right.
And that's the exact audience that we're trying to target with what we're talking about.
I was going to say that we all got so excited about 20%. It's like, ooh, 20%!
That's the thing.
Things go viral.
Well, thank you for correcting that, because we did use that misinformation. But still, we did have millennials in the room. We had a group who came out, and we actually did have people in the room who said they did not vote for whatever reason. But we did ask them why. And so some of the things that we heard mirror what was said here, that I think reforms maybe could help address. But one of the things, frankly, that we heard was that, you know, it just needs to be easier among a group who are used to voting for things on their phone, for instance. You know, but can you vote on your phone? No, probably not. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to do that. I do think that there's a lot of validity to something that was said earlier about just because we've been doing something one way for a long time doesn't mean that that's the way we should always do it. There was a time when we certainly weren't shopping on our phones. We weren't doing a lot of other things. So I think that we need to maybe be more creative and more innovative about the ways that people can have access to vote. But the biggest thing still that we heard was around information and the not knowing how. And frankly, we had people who were in their 30s and 40s in the room who said that they didn't know how, and at some point they reached a point where they were just too embarrassed to ask somebody, right? And so really putting information out there for people to understand. It's easy to say it's your civic duty, you should know, you should go and find out. But frankly, it's not really taught in schools anymore. There are no civic classes that really address this. So I actually think that the reform needs to go beyond just election reform, but also to how we address this in our education system and just in the information that we share publicly.
That's a great point. Thank you. Representative Ford.
So why do, I think people, we think about the days of the election, it's very cold, and you're competing with taking kids to school and getting to work. So if we could just change the day of the elections, maybe on the weekend or something where people are at home, that would be very helpful. And the other thing that I think if everyone knows that their vote counts, I passed the bill to eliminate the electoral college. Illinois is a part of the compact. If you see a president winning with fewer votes than the winner, than a loser, that's a problem. So we have to go to the popular vote, and then I think people feel much better about voting because they know that their one vote counts.
Thank you for that. Just on behalf of the administrators, perhaps, Illinois has tried to address this by instituting early voting, not the popular vote aspect, but early voting so that people can maybe vote on a weekend or on a different day. But as we see, there's drastically varying levels of engagement with early voting. Did anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, briefly, I'll touch on a couple of things that, David Orr led the push for early voting to expand access. And he led the push to open up mail voting so you didn't require an excuse or a lie. But these things come within bounds of being able to administer. And trusting that your vote counted is sort of the most crucial and critical of all the work we do as administrators, right? There are two virtues in elections. That the results you put out are true and that they're trusted. And if you're true but not trusted, they're worthless. And so at this point, while we're excited by the possibilities, the access promised by phone, there's simply no way to have a trusted sort of internet voting technology. We're not there yet. And coming back to trusting the results, I'm very excited by the idea that the efficiencies that these reforms could bring, by the potential sort of marginal increases in access. On my wall or on the window in my after the Russian incursion of 2016, what have you done to secure our elections? And for the last 2 years, all I've thought about really is cybersecurity. But when this panel came up, my attention was drawn back to a phone call we got from a woman running for office in 2015. So work with me for a minute and change your frame from a 2016 right versus left sort of partisan election and change it to hyper-local elections where everybody, they're pretty homogeneous populations, same party, and it's significant sort of infighting. The return on investment of bad behaviors is higher when it comes to municipal or city elections, these little contracts, than it is when you're voting for president. There's just no return. There's no reward for cheating in an even year. And there can be some rewards in odd years. So in 2015, I got a call from a woman who said, please help us. I'm running for office and they're cheating. We said, okay, and we sent people to the early voting site to pay a little bit more attention, to do a little more signature analysis. The next day, our mail voting unit comes in and says, I've got some highly suspect mail ballot requests from the same village. We looked at it, found a few more that we were suspecting. We called in law enforcement. We made ballots that we would send out to these addresses. They couldn't be counted. They were not going to affect this election, but we were going to try to get to the bottom of it because it requires due diligence. A week later, I got back a handful of ballots. We put on the gloves, opened them, said, boom, I know which campaign this is. The next day, from one of the other deliveries, another set comes. We knew it was going to happen, put on the gloves, opened it. It was a competing campaign, right? These are things that are rare, and they're unfortunate, they're isolated, but as administrators, we work our tails off to make sure it doesn't happen. So when I think about securing the elections, it's not just cyber, it's also this realm. To the extent we balance the efficiency and accessibility, we also must be balancing the security we provide to the candidates that are trying to get out from under corrupt local politics, the security that we provide to candidates who do not want to cast a ballot in front of abusive spouses or precinct committee campaigns, which is why if we move in this direction, it's very important that you've got the universal sort of vote sound model. So anyway, it's a continual balance of interests, and there is a significant interest in the security of the process, and we hear a lot of great stuff today on the efficiency and accessibility of it. But let's remember, as we move forward, as we think about legislation, that it takes a lot of work, a lot of eyes, a lot of resources to make sure that you root out this kind of bad behavior.
Thank you. So I actually want to dig into this question about security and mail-in voting, because this is an issue that many critics of vote by mail have brought up. Security, fraud, and voter intimidation seem to be the main concerns that some critics have. So in the 2016 presidential election, roughly 20% of absentee ballots that were sent out to voters were not returned, which meant that over 8 million ballots were floating around and unaccounted for that theoretically could have fallen into the wrong hands. There have also been some reports of voter intimidation. A mayoral candidate in Florida was convicted of coercing a group of voters to vote for him by standing over them while they filled out their ballots. And several years ago here in Illinois, in Cairo, there was a case where candidates were allegedly paying homeless people and others in the community $5 to vote for a particular candidate for sheriff and county clerk. Since it is much harder to ensure that a mail-in ballot is truly secret, how would you ensure that these types of problems don't occur and potentially swing a close race? And I think Amber can probably speak to some of the security measures they've implemented in Colorado, and the administrators here may be able to speak to steps they're prepared to take here.
Yeah, so, and similar to what Noah said, I mean, the process around all of this matters tremendously. And so, when we were polling place style. We had traditional polling places in Denver. We had early voting, and then we had mail-in, absentee, basically with those three models up until 2013. And interestingly enough, given the role that I had during most of that period of time, and then deputy director for some of it, and then director for some of it, I held various roles and kind of saw different pieces of it. And the interesting thing is, we actually referred a lot more issues and cases to our district attorney when we had polling places and early voting as the primary method. And the reason for that is, with polling places, and we probably have this here now, there's no address validation check on you as a voter prior to the election. Essentially no validation check. So you can go into the polls, you can sign in. In Colorado, at least, your ID and the address on your ID did not have to match what was listed in the poll book. Signatures don't have to match, none of that. I don't know how many of you in here had a fake ID prior to being 21. My guess is there might be a few of you. So in that polling place world, we actually ended up referring a lot of people that were on an inactive status that had not ever engaged with us for a few periods of time, kind of would come in, we hadn't seen them in a while, and they would sort of present an ID that didn't even have an address that matched what the poll book said, and really all they were required to do was sign the poll book, as long as that was them and presented the ID. We had a few people then after the election write and say, I know that person doesn't live in Denver anymore, they moved to somewhere else, and we would refer that over to the district attorney. We also, so with the mail ballot process, and I want to be very clear about this, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon probably now have, Colorado might be the highest because we have some other proactive list maintenance strategies that we do, but at any given moment, those states, especially right after an election, have the cleanest address files of any database in the country. And the reason for that is, by automatically mailing a ballot out to all voters, that's sort of an address check, kind of on the front end, right? So that ballot comes back undeliverable, it's not forwardable. So if your ballot comes back, we notify you, we let you know about that, but the voter has to do something. They have to either go to a vote center, they have to update their address online, or they have to call and sort of engage with us on what that issue is. That's not happening in any of the other methods of voting, right? So that's kind of the first address validation of where people are and if they're in the right precinct is one of the biggest reasons why there's issues where people vote in the wrong polling place or vote on the wrong races or that kind of thing. So there's some integrity issues that have historically existed there. Second thing, those that we have referred over, we catch on the front end so they're not counted. So if a signature doesn't match, for instance, in Colorado, signature verification, as I mentioned quickly earlier, is one of the key factors, at least right now, in administering a fair and secure process for mail ballots. Signature verification is not done well everywhere. I really say that up front. I think we've done some great things in Colorado, including in Denver, we would bring in someone that was a handwriting expert analysis person that trains FBI agents on this work, trained our election judges, and then we also use signature verification software that actually has a higher quality rate than human eyes necessarily do. So there's a lot of systems in place, and so if a signature doesn't match, and either the software or the judge says that, two other election judges that have to be from different party affiliations review every signature we have on file. We might have 20 to 25 to 30 different signatures for a voter because we scan and capture every envelope, every form, everything from the DMV, all of it. We go back and look at all of those, and then if they can match it, it gets accepted. If it doesn't, we send an affidavit to the voter and say, your signature didn't match, that's one of the security measures we have in place. Please fill out this affidavit and provide a copy of your ID, or go to a vote center. So that's kind of the method. And then let me just say one other point on this because it's important. So when we catch those that don't match, if the voter doesn't respond, we refer all of that over to the district attorney after the election, and none of those ballots are counted either. So that's the check. That check does not exist when you have polling places. Signature verification doesn't happen in most states with polling places or early voting. You don't check that. You literally just check the ID. Sometimes it's photo, sometimes it's not. So I actually would argue that there's more checks in the process that we have than not. So,
Amber, can you just very quickly go through what happens when the journey of a mail-in ballot and how that's tracked so people can understand
And
it?
after one quick addendum,
Oh,
we
sure.
stole your FBI training on signature analysis and put it into our poll books in our training. So we do it at the polling place.
Okay. So what was the journey of a mail-in ballot from the time it leaves, wherever it leaves, and how that process is tracked? How do you know where every ballot is at every point, and how does a voter know where their ballot is?
yeah, so Denver, another piece of technology that we created, and we created it primarily because we had a lot of customers calling us about this, but we created a system called Ballot Trace. It was first in the nation technology that basically allows a voter to track their mail ballot packet, so the actual outside envelope, using the intelligent mail barcode on the envelope that goes to the post office, just like you would a FedEx package that tells you where it is. It's on the truck, it's at delivery. Same thing for mail ballot. So half of the voters in Denver are now on that system. We developed it in 2009. And it allows you as a voter to know your ballot's been printed, then it's at the post office, then it's out for delivery to you, and then all the way back again. And we let you know when your signature's been accepted and that ballot's on its way into the county room. So that technology supports that. The other quick thing in Denver is we did not want to be like Oregon and Washington, where we required voters essentially to mail the ballot back through the post office, because one of the survey items that we asked voters about was voters wanted to still have that kind of in-person drop-off experience. So we've got all these 24-hour boxes across the city that are secured, actually higher security than what you would see with the post office boxes, camera, all of that. And they're 24 hours a day. You drop your ballot in there. And actually we have 80% of our voters that use that and less than 20% that are coming back through the mail as vote. So that's why it's very much a ballot delivery system.
Sorry, we'll have questions after the presentation. Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
chime in briefly on the topic of voter intimidation and harassment. It's really important for us all to back up for a moment as well and think about what the experience is like for a voter who's in that situation. Whether the pressure is coming from someone in their family or employment situation, or in the case of in-person voting, it could be coming from someone in that environment who's working at the polls or who's a passerby or a fellow voter. Those instances, unfortunately, still happen every single election. Many times they can be resolved properly with good communication with election officials who are working hard to do their job and protect the integrity of voting, like we've heard about today. But it can still be a deeply personal and distressing and at times humiliating experience. It's not something that actually many people want to talk about, whether it's with a government official or even a civil rights organization. So I'm not lobbying for or against a particular reform proposal right now, but anytime we're talking about a voter's personal experiences like that, it's important for us to be open to hear what the voter stories are. Whatever type of innovation is made to the voting system, ideally that would involve people having many different options of how they want to vote. But regardless of that, it's really important to still keep channels of communication open so we can hear about people's experiences, which might not always be what we think they are when we're making assumptions on why people are voting or not. And I think it's a wonderful conversation about that, but sometimes groups might look like they're not interested or look like they're not engaged, and there may be a deeper reason for why they're not turning out.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So you mentioned in your opening remarks, and again touched on now, that whenever you implement any kind of new system, you want to be sure to avoid disenfranchisement of any group. I think that's something that everybody in this room agrees on. And voting rights advocates, administrators, I'm sure will tell us that people vote in all different kinds of ways. Some people vote early, some people vote by mail, some people vote on election day, and that asking them to change the way they vote might impact different groups differently. So if we are to avoid having a negative impact on any particular group or disenfranchising anybody, what kind of process would you like to see, and the question is for the advocates, what you would like to see, and then perhaps for the administrators, what you're prepared to do to ensure that all voices are included in the process and that all the considerations and the needs of Illinois' very diverse voter population are incorporated into any kind of implementation plan.
I don't know that the data even support that question, because I think the key concern we would have in terms of a largely vote by mail along with vote centers program would be addressing homeless voters. So we have to make sure that they're able to receive and have an education program that's effective in reaching out to the homeless communities so that they have a place that they can receive the ballot by mail and or some kind of alternative. But the data point to increases in turnout at all age levels, especially among millennials, and the bigger hurdles that we encounter now with the precinct-based system involve the complexity of the system itself, making sure that these giant election supply carriers are loaded with all the proper ballot styles and the judges hand out the proper ballot styles to the voters, that they don't misinterpret each voter's situation. You eliminate a lot of these issues in terms of just the security, the voter's experience, much less the security of the system. But the biggest group I would be concerned with probably the homeless population. But beyond that, I think the numbers bear out that participation rose to just 5%.
I just want to add a couple data points here. It's actually not true that changing vote the ways that people vote never negatively impacts a group. There was vote by mail, because there have been cases, for example, Maricopa County in Arizona, they instituted a vote center system without proper procedures and without a proper process that it included everyone, and it resulted in 5-hour lines and up to 100,000 people disenfranchised. And there have been other cases where polling places were closed in Georgia and North Carolina that negatively impacted minority communities. I'm not saying that will happen here. I'm saying, how do we make sure that that doesn't happen here? And what process do the advocates think would ensure that that wouldn't happen here, and would the administrators be prepared to invest in that kind of process?
I think
we definitely need to be clear when we're talking about vote center proposals, and I think today is largely in the spirit of brainstorming, and that's a good thing if we're talking about many different kinds of proposals. It's a wonderful place to start, but eventually we need to be very clear with the community at large. Are we talking about closing polling places? Are we talking about potentially increasing the transportation time and complexity for most or all or many community members? And if that's the case, it's not that increased transportation time is always going to be a bad thing. There might be some efficiencies and improvements in the process, but we can't take it for granted. It's certainly critical to get input from community members who would be affected by polling place closures. It raises red flags for civil rights advocates and for communities directly affected when there is a suggestion that polling places be closed as opposed to being improved, made more accessible, as opposed to being moved to a more favorable location. If we're talking about polling place numbers being reduced, which is some of what we've been having on the table today, that can be a problem. It's not always a problem. Some polling places are problematic and they should be closed, but we have to have a frank conversation about what kind of reforms we're considering, and it's important that there is a race equity analysis that's done before the passage of any reform, not after the fact, trying to fix the problem.
I just wanted to touch on the question, the part of the question having to do with Maricopa County, which has become the new Miami-Dade. So I don't know that we can hold them up as an example of all the things that can go wrong. They're an example of one place where it does go wrong on a consistent basis.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Ani was saying, because I think that education and outreach is very, very important. Whenever you're making any kind of a significant change in the way people are voting or doing anything for that matter. but I think particularly when you're talking about voters with disabilities who have historically been underrepresented at the polls, it's very important that a significant effort is made to educate and do outreach to people with disabilities and to give them a meaningful opportunity to provide input, because I think often well-intended reforms may have unintended consequences. And so, I mentioned earlier that transportation can be an issue for people with disabilities. So if we're going to look at increased use of vote centers, how would that impact someone who is already having difficulty accessing and getting to the polls, depending on where that is located and how many there are. So I really do think that is key. And we support that.
If I may just add one more thing, so I think that that's absolutely right. And it doesn't just impact people with disabilities. I think it also impacts impoverished communities where you may not have access to transportation to be able to get to a vote center. So I would just say that any reforms to be made, that it's not sort of all or nothing. I think that as in many things, there should be multiple ways, and we have that in Illinois, but as we add more, that it should not necessarily eliminate other things, because there will always be people who one way works better.
I think we learned a little bit yesterday. There's a similar, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a kind of maturing path that some of these states, so Colorado and then California, where voting by mail expanded naturally. And at a point, you get to a tipping point. And I think Colorado is in the 70-80%. We're already voting this way, and that's because I think they instituted a permanent list at some point when they were beyond 50. California did the same thing, and now is moving towards a model that would let each county choose which way they want to implement it. But in that sort of slower progressing path, we wrestle by necessity with the concerns that are raised here, and we come to a solution. So the incrementalism, which is natural in our politics and certainly in our state, would seem to suggest that there may be a path forward that can expand the opportunities, get some of these efficiencies, while giving us time to work through a significant set of questions that were raised here.
Noah, could you, for the audience, because I'm not sure everybody knows what the vote by mail process is here in Illinois, you referenced permanent voting by mail application. Could you say what the process is like now versus what it was in Colorado or is now in Colorado?
Well, I'll pass it when we get to Colorado, but here in Illinois, you have to request each election. So we did a major reform a few years ago, which was to allow people to request ballots online. We went to that, actually, we get an 11% higher return rate from voters who requested online, and that's because they're set into an automatic trigger of emails and texts. Their ballot goes out the next day. They get the instant gratification you come to expect in modern life. And campaigns are sending you a lot of paper, you've got a backlog to work through. In any event, so there's some modernization. But we get a request, we send out a ballot, the ballot comes back in, and we scan it, take a picture of the signature on the ballot envelope, compare it to signatures of record. If they don't match, we get another set of eyes on it. Ultimately, if it doesn't match, we trigger notification both by paper and electronically to those voters so that they've got time to cure.
And what would be the permanent vote by mail application?
So let me talk about that.
Okay.
So Colorado was that where we required voters to request a ballot every election.
So you would have to apply every year.
Back in it was actually every election to start. Then it went to calendar year. And now imagine this, as people are doing that, that means the election offices are data entering all of that paper and then sending out a ballot and then processing the ballot on the back end, right? So a lot of duplicate work. Every year, same voters requesting basically, and we started to look at that, right? Well, then Colorado went to a permanent list. When we went to a permanent list, all of those voters that normally did it, and then about 50% more, added themselves to that permanent list. And so by 2008 was the first year that we had the permanent list. In like a 6-month period, Colorado jumped up to like 60% of voters within like 6 months that had requested. So that 2008 election, almost 60% of Colorado voted that way, and then we had polling places and early voting. Then fast forward another 4 years, and we have counties in the state of Colorado during the 2012 presidential that were 90% of voters requesting their ballot by mail. Denver was 70%, and a lot of the more urban areas tend to be lower, and LA has seen that in other places. But of that 70%, they have much higher turnout in that election amongst that group of voters. And then that 30% of voters that didn't request or weren't on the permanent list, my guess is about 80% of them called us and said, my friend, my family, my roommates, everyone got a mail ballot, why did I not get one? And so then I had all these calls after the 2012 election from people saying, what the heck, why am I the only one that didn't get one? And by the way, you sent me one automatically in the primary because in every election except for the even year general elections, we were allowed to do all vote at home. So we were municipal elections or primaries and kind of these off elections. We were really confusing people because they were like, why is everyone getting one but not me? So then that was when we went to the legislature, and there were counties that had 90%. Denver was on the lower side at 70, 72, but still by far the majority. And then the rest of them, all of the calls I had all that call data, and about all these people that wanted one, right? So it was very incremental. And so I think, for Illinois not having a permanent list, I think the most obvious step is do a permanent list and let voters choose. Because our voters kind of chose themselves. And so a lot of people say, well, how did you market this change? We didn't have to do a lot to market the change because voters were kind of self-selecting. Now Colorado voters expect it, right? And we get voters now that come from other states, and I tell this story a lot. I have a whole file folder full of these notes. We would get thank you notes from people like, I voted in 5 different states. It's never been easier than it was here. You automatically sent it to me. I can't believe it. Or I moved to another county 2 weeks before the election and my ballot arrived and I never filled out a form. How did you do that? So this is a big deal. That is not something when I came to Denver in 2005, we were not getting thank you notes about the voting process, right? So that's a big deal. That most election officials don't have a file full of thank you notes, but that's the incremental change, and I think that it is much better to do incremental than it is to say, everyone is going to do this and we're going to force this upon you.
So just to clarify, so in Illinois now, voters need to send an application every year if they want an absentee ballot. They don't need an excuse.
Every election.
Every election, sorry. They don't need an excuse, but they have to send it every election. What you're suggesting, and what I think I'm hearing from the administrators, is that we move to a permanent list where you can opt to permanently get absentee ballots sent to you every year. And every election, sorry. And then the next step from that may be the election authority automatically sends a ballot to everybody, regardless of whether they've opted in or not. Is that?
Yeah, I think if you let voters put themselves on a permanent list, then Noah and Jim's teams don't have to process a bunch of paper applications every single election cycle to get them ready to then go out. So and I guarantee if they go and look, most of the same voters every time request their ballot by mail. So it sort of gives you administrative efficiencies, and then the voter doesn't have to waste their time filling out an application every time.
And then the idea, the connection with vote centers then is that as more and more people move to vote by mail, there are fewer people who will be voting in person, and that might be a way to reduce the number of voting centers without disenfranchising people.
The idea about vote centers for us was we had a lot of people that would show up at the wrong polling places because they didn't get the right notice, or they would end up voting a provisional then and be in the wrong place, or they worked a long way away from their assigned polling place and couldn't get there. And so we wanted to have basically vote centers where you could go to any of them across the city. If you were at the grocery store and there was one near there, you could do that, or if you were at work and it was there. We wanted to make it convenient and maintain in-person options for the point earlier that was brought up about homeless voters and the program. We developed a whole program around that. We just wanted to make sure that we basically covered convenient options for every single voter that wanted it. Most voters are using the mail ballot that we mailed to them, but as we saw in 2016, about 7% of our voters came in person. They had the ability to do that at a vote center. And we also, in the jail voting program, we've created a jail voting program in Denver. We actually, because we automatically mail ballots out, we have a team of election judges that go to the county jail facilities, facilitate the voting process, deliver the ballots, and have accessible equipment, tablets available for them to participate. While if they're eligible and they're serving, they can do that. And we do that because they can't get out and go to a polling place, or they can't get out and go to a vote center, so they have extra logistical challenges, and so we facilitate that process, and this model allows us to build programs like that. We do the same thing for nursing homes and assisted living, and we deliver out, and our election judges go and facilitate that entire process at every one of those sites that meet those qualifications.
And just to clarify again how the vote center model would work, you would be able to vote, a voter would be able to vote anywhere within their county. So if you lived in Cook County, you wouldn't just have to go to your precinct. You would be able to go to any vote center within Cook County, correct? That's what we're talking about here in Illinois as well, right? The vote center model.
Yeah, the vote center means you can go to any vote center within your jurisdiction. In theory, because of technology and what have you, you in theory could go across county, and we're working on a few pilots like that in Colorado. In Colorado, we allow you to drop your mail ballot off at any drop box around the state. So if another county receives the ballot, it will be counted, it will be transferred. I would imagine the Chicago Board of Elections in Cook County can figure that out. It's the same building.
We do that now with voter registration, vote and mail applications as it stands, yes.
All right, well, great. I think we're going to move to question and answer period now.
Yeah, I have worked in Concord County. We have a lot of concerns about vote by mail and vote centers. So, let's do a few vote centers in Colorado. Sure. In Colorado, with your vote centers, do you provide ballots, big ballots, in those centers? Do you have ballot on demand?
Yeah, so we have ballot on demand, and then we have the system that we have is the Dominion system with a ballot marking device. So in Denver and across Colorado, every single ballot that's cast is on a piece of paper. 95% are hand marked, 95 plus, maybe 97% hand marked paper ballots, whether it's mail or in person. And then a subset of people that use or choose to use the ballot marking device that provides the accessible options. But every ballot is counted in a central count environment and has a piece of paper. And we didn't talk about this today, but we're also the first state to implement risk limiting audits statewide. So we also just conducted that in 2017, and then all the elections now going forward will have that post-election risk limiting audit as well.
Yes.
Jim, I'd like you to give me, if you have the figures available, how many mail-in applications you got already? Because I'm starting to get tons of phone calls for mail-in applications. Please believe that might be something you want to do in Illinois. Secondly, what I found with millennials in doing voter registration is that if you say, when I go to high schools, if I say how many of you have smartphones, everybody raises their hand. How many of you will be 18 by November 6th? Of course, the ones who will raise their hand. And I say, how many are registered to vote? Most times do not. But I said, take out your smartphone, go to Chicago Board of Elections, and register right now. My alma mater, we took 225 students to early vote because you're the problem, but the day before early voting.
These are good problems to have.
Just to say, in terms of dealing with the lineage, high school students, especially, anything you can do on your own.
Yes.
So,
Right now, we're at more than 65,000 applications to vote by mail, and To put that in perspective, at this point in the 2016 presidential election, when we were on our way to a modern record, we had only 18,000. So we've already more than tripled that, and we're hoping to break our record from World War II of 116,000 when we had people deployed all over the planet. So we're expecting to exceed that record this year. And we're also, because of that, going to be implementing a risk limiting audit that focuses on the signature validation process, signature verification process at this election. Even though it's not mandated by state law, it's allowed that we can perform risk limiting audits. So we're going to be doing that starting with, we're still working out the numbers, but approximately 1 to 2% of all the vote by mail applications. We're just going to look at the applications and the certifications.
Thank you. In the back there? Yeah.
So Amber, you talked about putting the voter first. And I think here in Illinois we're still stuck a little bit in the elected incumbents come first based on the laws. So I'm just getting curious. I also feel like we see some pushback on some of our ideas that we're discussing today from political groups, poll watchers who want to be able to track a certain election. So for example, we're talking about vote centers as a way to put the voter first and make it a better process for the voter. But then the poll watchers say, well, I can't track the ward-wide elections easily that way because I don't know which place around the city everybody's going to. So sort of a two-part question is, number one, how do you balance out those other interests when you do put the voter first? And then number two, what I was going to ask, which recently came up, are risk limiting audits one of the solutions to be able to show to the poll watchers, we've got accuracy. We can show you this process, we can watch this process, we can do the risk limiting audit to show you our accuracy.
Yeah, so the model we have in Colorado has actually made campaigns and watching and all that much easier, right? So one thing we're doing, we mail the ballots out 3 weeks prior, so people start returning them. So campaigns, they're, okay, that person's done, now we can move on to other people. Second part of that, with the watching, you used to have to like scribble down names or get the list from the poll books and the sites, right? We actually are now providing every hour real-time data to the campaigns. They can download and see exactly who's voted, literally every hour, right? So their operations are actually getting more efficient because then they're pulling those people out of their files, then they're doing their GOTV and what have you. My next thing, and I swear I'm working on this and I'm having discussions about this, if I think, and because like your voter record is basically public that you voted, we are, and I've talked to them, but there are now with technology, we think that there might be possibilities of turning off digital ads and campaign ads off of TV programming if you've turned your ballot, right? So based on your bill, this is the way to get people to vote early. I'm totally agreeing. So, no, but I mean, and we did that actually with our marketing campaign. So we can, you know, with our Facebook and digital marketing and all of that, you're basically looking for certain individuals and then popping up the ads. When we match that then to whether or not you vote or not, you no longer see the have you turned your ballot in or see any of the political ads or whatever else, you're much happy camper. So, I mean, that is the beauty of this, right, is that by spreading it out over a longer period of time and getting away from the election day sprint that we're sort of used to in our politics and making it more of an election season, people have more options. Administrators, we're mitigating and sort of separating risk as well, right? You have everything intensely focused on one day, that's a lot of risk. Everything has to go perfectly to make all of that work. And so mitigating that over time, and then there's benefits to do things like turn off the nasty political ads if we can figure that out.
We have time for 2 more, unfortunately. Just you over there and then you. Me? Yeah, okay.
This is, I need new glasses, these are new glasses. Amber, I think primarily. I have questions about what you refer to as the cleanest ballots on record, and I'm worried about how do you not shift clean record. How does that not shift into partisan voter caging, which ends up purging otherwise eligible voters if they don't turn in the ballot, if they don't respond? Because that's been a significant problem since the 60s, and we hear about it much. that was a tactic to encourage voting, and it sounds a lot like the process that you use to sort of keep your registers clean. And then my other question for you is, how does one stay on a permanent list? And forgive me if you already talked about that.
Yeah, I think so not purging at all. I mean, I said that Colorado, Oregon, and Washington have the cleanest address files for voters, meaning we have the most up-to-date information because we interact with them more than any other state does. We also have automatic registrations, so we're consuming data from the DMV and other entities. We also are consuming information from the United States Post Office and the National Change of Address data files. We literally get that every 2 weeks. That is, most states are not interacting with their voters in the same amount of ways that we are, meaning we are getting more information about where they are, and then their address gets updated, and then they get the correct information, and we get the ballot where they are. So not canceling. I never said anything about canceling or purging or any of that. I said that we're using data more effectively to make sure we have correct and updated information for voters. We also in Colorado got rid of the inactive for failure to vote status in this reform. So 5 years ago we eliminated that. So we no longer inactivate someone for not voting. We only inactivate you if we've gotten a piece of mail back and you haven't responded to us. So we get a piece of mail back, like a ballot, for instance. Every other piece of mail besides a ballot we send forwardable, so we would never get it back. But if a ballot comes back, we then have to send you a forwardable piece of information and say, hey, we got this back undeliverable, please respond and update your address. So that's the only time we put anyone on a status like that, which is the least aggressive in the country. And then we also then follow up with another mailing under the MVRA and reach out to those voters. And we're one of the early adopters of ERIC, meaning that we're getting information from other states as well. So we actually, I guess your term was purge or any of that, that actually happens probably less in Colorado than anywhere else because we don't have that inactivation for failure to vote anymore.
That's different from somebody.
We have election day voting too,
Right,
election day registration.
I guess my concern is you have duly eligible voters who for various reasons they don't need, which is, I triage my mail and this vote. Various reasons that people can't return something, and often these are duly eligible voters who are then purged from the voting list because they didn't return. That application is different from purging somebody who hasn't voted for a few months.
Yeah, no, I never said that though. I
I
never
didn't
said
say
we
you did. I
purge.
just-
Yeah, we don't purge anyone for not filling out an application or not, or the mail thing. We don't do any of that.
And
Yeah.
then how does one stay on the permanent list?
So we don't have a permanent list anymore. We automatically mail ballots to every active voter.
So I already mentioned the permanent list.
We had a permanent list before we went to this reform. Now every single voter in Colorado gets a ballot automatically before every single election.
They expanded the permanent list to everybody.
Yeah.
Does that mean anyone who has a driver's license
No, you don't need, so it's every voter. So if you're an active voter in Colorado, meaning you are registered to vote, and we haven't gotten a piece of, like a ballot back from you undeliverable, and you haven't responded to a communication. So we have a small number of voters that are on what's called an inactive undeliverable list. That doesn't make them ineligible. That just means we're not mailing them a ballot. They need to go in person to a vote center if they haven't responded to the communications.
Is everybody who's registered to get a ballot?
Yes,
Okay.
not inactives.
The more picture is automatically get ballot.
The picture ID doesn't have anything to do with it. Right, and that's fine. You have to meet the registration requirements and then we mail a ballot. Picture ID doesn't.
So, if I recall, one of the first slides that Ms. McReynolds showed was based on the primary, and if we had a nonpartisan primary or a jungle ballot primary, would that help increase voter turnout? And is it possible to do that in a state like Illinois?
There's actually a conference coming up about this held by Fair Vote, the organization Fair Vote, on October 19th and 20th. So there are some people who are interested in ranked voting and nonpartisan jungle primaries in Illinois. It's an emerging idea. So
I'm unaffiliated, so I'm a big advocate of open primaries, and I think we need significant primary reform generally, but Minnesota is one of the top states for turnout. They use that method, they use ranked choice in Minneapolis, and they also don't require you as a state to register with an affiliation, which I think you guys have that here too. So I do think open primaries are helpful with primary turnout.
just one more, but that's really.
Thank you, Mr. Lasker, for bringing up poll watchers. Poll watchers are a really important part of the system. They are the shotgun system. So in Illinois, in early voting and on election day, poll watchers are allowed to see every application, every signature that the voter signs, and they're allowed to look at the electronic poll book. And if a poll watcher doesn't think their signatures, they can challenge that voter based on the signature impression. We are not allowed to do that with mail-in ballots. So here, mail-in ballots are held to a much lower standard than election day or early voting. So my question for you is, what role do poll watchers play in the signature verification process for mail-in ballots in Colorado?
And then I'd also like James to be able to respond on the Chicago side.
They get to watch every single part of the process. They can come into the room, and we've actually in Denver designed the signature verification room. I think Noah's been there. We have all the screens and then the judges that sit there, and then there's actually a space behind each area. Like you can literally, we allow poll watchers to walk in amongst the room. They are allowed to challenge, and then we also allow watchers in the counting room. Same kind of design. There's basically a public viewing area behind every single station. So we have windows surrounding everything. I mean, I think 250 people toured the office on election day a few years ago when they somehow ended up giving 10 tours that day. But that's one of the reasons we built our system the way it was, and I put up the transparency and accountability to provide more visibility into the process for everyone involved in the election.
Our long-range strategic plan, if and when there is a transition to a system similar to this, envisions allowing poll watchers to be able to challenge the certification, because that would be long after there would be no applications, and we would be able to challenge the signature on the certification. I would also like to point out that right now, unless you are backed by a multimillionaire or yourself a multimillionaire, there is no way to effectively monitor between the city and the county alone, much less statewide. It's 10,000 precincts, but just in Cook County, 3,600 precincts on election day. And then for a 15-day period, 110 early voting sites, whereas you could effectively monitor a countywide, citywide race entirely in one central count, largely, and or maybe a handful of vote centers and stuff like that. So it's actually, in terms of transparency, a leveling point, just like the possibility of, Noah and I have talked about this, capturing the scanned image of every ballot on newer technology and being able to share those images after an election.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you for taking the time. And thank you for a very engaged audience. It was a really great discussion.
Thank you so much, Elisa, for moderating. Thank you, everybody who came today. Thank you for staying after. I know